Most people don't fail at life. They don't collapse. They don't fall apart. They don't lose everything overnight. They wake up. They go to work. They come home. They sleep. And they do it again. Years pass quietly like this. Nothing goes terribly wrong. Nothing goes remarkably right. And one day, not suddenly, not dramatically, they realize something they don't know how to say out loud. Their life feels unfinished. This is the life most people live. And almost no one talks about it. He wasn't special. That matters. He wasn't unlucky. He wasn't exceptionally talented. He wasn't broken in any obvious way. If you passed him on the street, nothing about him would stay with you. He lived in a neighborhood that looked like many others. Rows of similar houses, similar cars, similar mornings, lights turned on before sunrise, engines started. Garage doors opened and closed. Life moved with quiet efficiency. He woke up to an alarm that sounded the same every morning. Not too loud, not too gentle, just enough to remind him it was time. He showered, thought about nothing in particular, put on clothes that felt appropriate. Not exciting, not uncomfortable. He drank coffee that tasted fine. Not great, not bad, just fine. The day hadn't done anything wrong yet. That was the strange part. Nothing asked for his attention. Nothing demanded urgency. Nothing felt alive. And still something felt heavy. Work filled most of his days. Not because he loved it. Not because he hated it. Because it was there. Meetings blurred together. Emails stacked up and disappeared. Conversations repeated themselves. He answered questions he'd answered before. Solved problems that returned later in a different form. He was competent. People relied on him. And somehow that made it harder to admit he felt empty. At night he sat down, phone in hand, TV on in the background. The volume stayed low. He wasn't really watching. He wasn't really resting. He was numbing the day enough to be ready for the next one. Sometimes he thought about doing something different. Reading, writing, walking. But the couch was closer, and tomorrow was already waiting. One night, brushing his teeth, he caught his reflection in the mirror. Just for a second, and a question appeared. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet thought. Is this how my life is supposed to feel? He didn't answer it. He rinsed his mouth, turned off the light, got into bed. The question stayed behind. No one teaches you how to talk about this kind of life. Because from the outside, it looks successful. You're functioning. You're responsible. You're doing what you're supposed to do. So when you feel disconnected, you feel guilty. And so you stay quiet. You don't complain. You don't question too much. You adapt. Years pass without ceremony. Birthdays feel shorter. Weekends end faster. You stop making plans that stretch far into the future. You stop asking questions that don't have clear answers. And slowly, quietly, life becomes something you manage instead of something you live. One evening, something small interrupted the routine. He ran into someone he hadn't seen in years. They exchanged polite smiles, caught up briefly. Then came the question, "So, what have you been up to?" He opened his mouth and realized he didn't know how to answer. He listed obligations, not experiences. When the conversation ended, he stood alone longer than necessary. That question followed him home. That night, lying in bed, he understood something uncomfortable. He had been postponing his life. Not intentionally, not dramatically, just slowly. He kept waiting for a future version of himself to arrive and take over. But ordinary life has no warning signs. It doesn't tell you when you've waited too long. This life is dangerous because it feels safe. It doesn't hurt enough to force change. It doesn't inspire enough to create movement. So you stay. And one day, you realize you've become very good at surviving a life you never chose consciously. He noticed small things. How silence felt heavier than before. How joy came and left quickly. How excitement felt distant. Nothing screamed. Everything whispered. And he realized something frightening. You don't need a tragedy to lose your life. You can lose it gradually. This is not a story about reinvention. He didn't quit his job. He didn't disappear. He didn't transform overnight. He did something smaller. He started paying attention to what drained him, to what quietly mattered, to what he had been avoiding. That awareness changed the texture of his days. Most people think change begins with action. It doesn't. It begins with honesty. That sentence is heavy, so most people never say it. This story isn't about him. It's about millions of people. People who didn't fail. People who didn't fall. And still feel something missing. That feeling is not weakness. It's awareness. Most people live this life. The quiet one. The acceptable one. The unspoken one. And the tragedy isn't that it exists. The tragedy is never stopping to ask if it's truly yours. If the story felt familiar, you're not alone. Subscribe to Quiet Life Stories for calm, honest stories about the lives most people live and the questions most people avoid. The acceptable one, the unspoken one, and the tragedy isn't that it exists. The tragedy is never stopping to ask if it's truly yours. If the story felt familiar, you're not alone. Subscribe to Quiet Life Stories for calm, honest stories about the lives most people live and the questions most people avoid.